Today I'm going to talk about social insects and how they could have evolved. For example, the honeybee. Now, in a beehive, there's just one mother, the queen bee, and she spends her whole life producing the eggs that become the next generation. The queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. This is only possible because she has the entire rest of the hive working tirelessly to provide her with the things she needs. They do all this without ever producing a single offspring for themselves. But how could this happen if evolution is the natural selection of traits that survive and reproduce? Well, that is a good question. It stumped even Darwin for a while. What is the purpose of a gene that tells an organism not to reproduce? Every single cell in our body carries deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA for short. DNA is kind of like a flash drive that contains all the code that makes you who you are. These genes control one portion of our information, for example, if we have blue eyes or brown eyes. These genes are programmed to replicate themselves over generations. Biologically speaking, the genes that provide the most advantage to their organism will be selected for and will have more chance of being in the next generation. Now, for a gene, getting into the next generation usually means having children and raising them until they can survive on their own. If humans make a child, that child will receive 50% of its DNA from its mother and 50% from its father. They share half our DNA, which means half our genes survive the generation game, and possibly get passed down into grandchildren. The more children we have, the more chances that different genes of ours will get passed along. So you would think that all animals work the same way, producing their own offspring to spread their own gene. But this isn't always the case. Here's where kin selection comes into play. Kin selection says that sometimes it's more beneficial to help your relatives rather than yourself, depending on the benefit to the relative and the cost to you. The cost to you is really high, giving up your reproductive value as an organism to help your relative reproduce at their most efficiently. But let's keep in mind that you're not just related to your children. As long as you're 50% or more related to your parents or siblings, it will benefit you just as much as raising your own children to adulthood as helping your mother produce a sibling. Just as you got half your genes from your mother and father, your sister got half her genes from them too, but there's a 50% chance from each gene that she got the same one, since there's only 2 possible genes to have. Other sisters become reproductive members through the way they're raised, and your genes will be passed on just as well as if you had your own children. By caring for your sisters and mother, you would get more genes into the world than you ever could with your own offspring. So this is how caste systems could have evolved. Because kin selection lets you put more genetic information into the world than one could alone.